Okay, great. Okay, so let's see. I'm just trying to see if I can see who all is here. Let's see. Do we have residents in attendance? Looks like we do. Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming to this meeting to get an update regarding the modifications to the plan for 1900 for the Housing Authority of Cook County, in conjunction with who's the partner in this?
Related Midwest, and Kurt Bailey is on this.
Yeah, so Related Midwest and Housing Authority, the modification of the project for the 1900 parking lot space next to the Perlman. Glad everybody who's in attendance today is here. We all, I know, care deeply about our neighborhoods, and so we'll be interested to hear about what the modifications entail. And by the way, just so folks know, the chat is turned off. You can make comments to me or to the other hosts here, and that's only done because it makes like a pinging noise, and so sometimes it's hard when the speakers are speaking. But if anybody objects to that or feels it's really, sort of essential to the participation to have it on, let me know or message me, and I can see about trying that as long as it's not disruptive. So we turned it off just for that purpose, but you can message myself or the other host during the presentation. So, okay, well, no further ado.
All right.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, introductions. So would Megan, would you like to do? Megan Jones from the city is here, and I don't know, would you consider making the introductions?
Sure. My name is Megan Jones. I'm the neighborhood land use planner with the city of Evanston. I also have Sarah Flax here on the call, and of course, Johanna Neiden, who's the director of community development. So I have a very quick overview, and then I'll hand it over to Hax to provide some more details. So I will share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. Right, so what HAC is proposing, which is provided in the postcards that went out for this meeting, is a major adjustment to an approved plan development. So what is a major adjustment? There can be both minor and major adjustments to approved plan developments. And minor adjustments within the zoning code are defined as altering the locations of a structure or group of structures by no more than 1/4 of the distance shown on the approved plans between other structures or circulation, i.e. a driveway or something like that. Altering the location of any circulation elements by not more than 1/4 of the distance shown on the approved plans. Altering the siting of any open space by not more than 20%. Altering any final grade by not more than 20%. Altering the location and type of landscaping elements by not more than 20%. And altering the location or type of utility equipment. So this can also take into account minor things like changing the window placement and smaller things like that with regards to the design of the building. So items that require changes beyond these or that are not listed are considered to be major adjustments. As part of the review, minor adjustments are generally approved administratively. So they're reviewed and approved by the Design and Project Review Committee, which is a committee made up of city staff from various departments. Major adjustments, however, are reviewed by DAPR, Plan Commission, and ultimately approved by the City Council. So a little background on the development to this point. The development itself was approved in November 2020. I believe it was November 23rd, to be exact. What they are proposing as part of the major adjustment, which includes some of the minor adjustments that I mentioned, is a reduction in dwelling units from 268 to 252 total. And with this, it's important to note that the 34 on-site affordable units will be maintained. And I believe at the same AMI as well. They're proposing a reduction in the below grade parking spaces from 37 to 25. a reduction in the zoning height slightly from 172 feet 8 inches to 168 feet, and I believe that's supposed to be 4 inches. It'll still have the same number of stories at 16. The modifications that are proposed do lead to an increase in FAR to 4.37. It's currently 4.33 as approved. The timeline at this point, tentatively have the Design and Project Review Committee review at September 29th. This is a weekly meeting, so that can change. Plan Commission date is tentatively proposed for, or pretty much confirmed for, October 13th of this year. And then Planning and Development Committee and City Council would be sometime in November. Just to note, for the Plan Commission meeting, you'll be getting a separate postcard alerting you to that meeting, the time, and how that will be held. So that pretty much covers my quick overview. I will stop sharing.
And can I, after each speaker, if we could just, if it would be all right for folks to ask questions, because I know sometimes if it's, gets postponed too far down the line, the questions either get forgotten. Would it be all right to see if anybody has questions just up to there?
That would be fine.
I think when it comes to our presentation, our presentation will be quick. I think we can cover all the questions at the end of it, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. All right, Megan. So from the HAC related Midwest team, why don't we just introduce ourselves so that people know who we are as distinguished from neighbors and members of the public. So my name is Bill James. I'm a consultant to the Housing Authority, have been throughout the duration of this project. Other members of our team, please introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rich Minacchio, the director of the Housing Authority, and we appreciate your interest and especially Councilmember Kelly's reconvening the community to help us explain these changes.
Greg?
I'm Greg Klasowski. I'm a senior associate with Papa George Hames Partners. We're the architect on the project.
I'm sorry, what is your firm, Greg?
Papa George Hames Partners down in Chicago.
Alicia?
I'm sorry. I thought I was off mute. This is Alicia Hushaw. I'm the Chief of Staff for the Housing Authority of Cook County.
Kurt Bailey?
I had to go on mute. Someone was driving loudly by my office. Kurt Bailey with Related Midwest, and we are, as echo Rich's thoughts, we're delighted to be here and joining this team with Cook County Housing and Rich and Alicia to develop what we think is going to be a really beautiful building in addition to Evanston. I have several members of my team on as well. Sarah Wick, who runs all of our projects here, as well as Charlie Troche, who is working on this, and Denise Hall, one of our experts who's been with the company for nearly 30 years. So we appreciate the opportunity and look forward to answering any questions.
And Nancy Guzman, are you with us?
Here, I am Director of Development at the Housing Authority of Cook County, and I'm excited to be here with everyone. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think that are all the members of our team present.
We have a couple more, Bill. We actually have one member of our board is with us today,
Yes.
Saul Klivenow.
And I am Saul Klivenow. I'm a member of the board of the Housing Authority of Cook County, and I am an Evanston resident.
And we also have our general counsel with us today, John.
Yeah, I'm John Duncan. I'm the general counsel of the Housing Authority of Cook County.
Okay, great. So we have a brief presentation to go over the proposed changes to the approved development, and we'll start with some opening comments by Rich Minacchio.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, the City of Evanston, and everybody who's on the call. You've heard from us before. We are going to get through this, I think, relatively quickly, so we'll have ample time for questions. First, I want to say that, you know, we had a great team at the outset. The team is even better now with the addition of Related Midwest. Their record speaks for itself in terms of the quality of the development and their commitment to affordable housing as well. So we're very pleased to have Related with us at this point in the project. That when we introduced the project in November, when it was passed, we weren't at that point, but it's a great addition to us. So thank you. And of course, our friends, Bill, who's done great with us from Camiros, and Greg from Papa George. We also have a top flight contractor in the queue who's going to build this the right way and hopefully minimize disruptions. I'm just going to start off, we're going to hear about really two major changes. One is the reduction in the number of units, and the other is the reduction in the number of underground parking spaces. We'll go through that, why that is necessary. But I think what's really important to note in terms of the overall impact of this project, the essence of the project and the things we committed to the city and the community stay. We are providing the same number of affordable apartments, and that number is actually 51. 34 is under the ARO for Evanston, which is for very low income residents. So we're providing the 34, but as we have from the start, we're providing 17 apartments. We're writing down the rents on 17 apartments for folks at 80% of median income. So even though we're reducing the overall number of units by 16, we're maintaining the number of affordable units at 51. The second thing I really want to say, and then we'll get into the meat of it, is the building itself, the exterior, the architectural quality of the building is also going to remain. One of the best things, I think, one of the greatest benefits to the community about this building is that it is going to be an architecturally significant one. And none of the things that you're going to hear tonight is going to change that fact. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg from Papa George to go through it.
Actually,
Okay.
Bill, I think you're starting.
Oh, Bill's starting. I'm sorry.
So this is our agenda. We had open comments from Rich. I will cover some technical aspects of the plan development amendments, which frankly, Megan has already covered. Greg, our architect, will talk about the need for the amendments and revisions to the building. We do want to cover some comments that we've received from residents of the Perlman building. Some of them may be here, but they have provided written comments to us, and Rich will talk about those. Just go back over the process and the schedule briefly, and then open up for public discussion. So with that, Greg, please advance. So these were comments that Rich has already covered. So let's go to the next slide. And you know, the refinements that we're asking for are very minor to us anyway. We think everyone will agree. Nobody will really notice the change between what was approved and what's being proposed, I think. Next slide. And Rich has already thanked the city of Evanston and talked about what a great cooperative effort this has been. So let's go on to the next slide. Yes, so with respect to the plan development amendments, just a couple of points in case people don't know what a plan development is. It's a site-specific development approval that allows for certain departures from normally applicable development standards. This project was granted a plan development. I thought it was back in December of 2020, but I defer to staff if it was November by unanimous vote of the city council. Now we need a few minor refinements that, because of Evanston's code, need to go back through the approval process and ultimately be voted on by the city council. So that's how the approval relates to what we're asking for now. Next slide, Greg. So the plan developments do not alter the standing of the original development approval. So the approval of the project as originally proposed stands. That cannot be taken away. The property owner could develop the project as approved in case the city does not grant the requested amendments. And that question really is whether the city will allow the Housing Authority and its partner to make refinements, the ones that are being requested. And the refinements, the planned development amendments will be decided on their merits. Specifically, are the requests reasonable? Do they increase impacts on the neighborhood? Do they reduce project public benefit? Those will be the kind of considerations that we have been told City Council will make when they vote on these amendments. Next slide. As Megan said, any changes to approved plan developments are categorized by the Evanston zoning ordinance as either major or minor adjustments. The major adjustments must go through Evanston's full plan development approval process, culminating in a vote by City Council. Minor amendments are decided administratively by city staff and I guess through DAPR. The proposed refinements to the 1900 Sherman development require both major and minor adjustments. Next slide. And the 4 major adjustments Megan has already talked about. Very simply, reducing the number of units. Now you wouldn't, a lot of ordinances don't require a city council vote on reducing the number of units, reducing intensity of development. Evanston does. Reducing the height, you wouldn't, a lot of ordinances don't require, again, a city council approval to reduce the height because it's reducing the intensity of development, but Evanston's ordinance does. We are reducing the number of on-site parking spaces by 12. The increase in floor area ratio, even though we are actually reducing the overall amount of floor area in the development, we have adjusted the proportion of what's called common area, floor area, to the occupied floor area. And we've been more efficient in that. And since the common area floor area doesn't count in the floor area ratio calculation, there's been a slight shift upward from 4.33 to 4.37 in the floor area ratio. We're not actually asking for more floor area, actually less floor area, but the way it's calculated turns into a very marginal increase in FAR. Next slide. So the major amendments of note, I think the parking reduction may be something that there's some concern over. We think the reduction is actually very much warranted. We've reduced the number of units by 12. We're only reducing the number of parking spaces by, we're reducing the number of units by 16 and only reducing the number of parking spaces by 12. HAC did commission a parking study by an expert who projected peak demand at 52 cars for the new development. There's an abundant supply of parking in other nearby buildings, which we've always planned on accessing for our new residents. And we think securing an additional 12 spaces in other nearby buildings can be very easily done. We're very confident of that. I think city staff understands that there is a surplus in structured parking in nearby buildings and really have encouraged us to rely upon those spaces. In terms of the number of units, dwelling units that we're reducing, the affordable and missing middle units remain the same in terms of their number. There's no changes to the unit count. Therefore, proportionately, we're increasing the affordability of the building. In terms of the size of the affordable and missing middle units, they are larger than in the existing Perlman building next door. So the units are spacious and comfortable. And the mix of Studio 1 and 2 bedrooms reflects the demand for both affordable housing and market rate units as we understand them to be. So we think the adjustments we're asking for make the project better for us, the Housing Authority and related Midwest. We think it makes it better for the future tenants and occupants of the building. And we think the adjustments would be better for the neighborhood. Next slide. So we want to turn this over now to Greg at Papa George James, who will talk about why we need the amendments in terms of the design of the building.
Thanks, Bill. I'll walk everybody through what came about since the previous entitlement that has caused us to ask for some of these things. Really, the need for these amendments have come about due to 2 discoveries during the design development process. that happened. First, there was a structural issue with the Perman building, the building that's existing just to the north relative to its foundation, that's limiting what we can do for underground parking. We'll go into a little bit more detail on that in a moment. And then also the post-COVID market and tenant preferences for larger units and less common area. And that's going to lead to fewer but larger apartments, and we'll go over that as well. First, I'd like to explain what we're talking about relative to the reduction in the on-site parking. I've got a couple diagrams here. Hopefully, I'll try to explain it fairly simply so everybody gets it. The diagram on the left shows a cross-section through our buildings, and the sort of darker on the left lines that you're seeing is a cross-section through the existing Perlman building. And on the right in the gray is the building as we had proposed it. You're seeing some floors and then 2 levels of basement below, a basement ramp coming down and then sub-basement parking. Because the Perlman building is 11 stories tall, we had made some basic assumptions during the schematic design that it was probably on some sort of pier or caisson foundation, and that's what you're seeing in the shaded section coming down alongside what we're showing as our basement. And then there's this structural term, the zone of influence, that's shaded red below. And effectively what's happening with a caisson or a pier building, the weight of the building is transferred down into these piers and then it's distributed from a 45-degree angle into the soil below. In the case of caissons and piers, that's usually 50, 60 feet below grade, sometimes even connecting to bedrock. So usually would not have an impact building up against a building typically. What we found out during design development as we were starting to get the structural engineer involved and really understanding the existing conditions much better, including doing some digging, we realized that it was actually built on what's called a mat slab foundation. And with a mat slab foundation, the existing Perlman is essentially resting on one giant concrete slab instead of piers. And what that's doing, as you can see on the right, that big red zone of influence isn't getting pushed down below the basement levels, but it's actually diagramming out right through our basement and through both basements of the parking structure. This really does a couple of things. It really makes the walls and the structure extremely difficult and challenging to do, but it also means that any construction that we're doing within this zone could have impacts on the Perlman building itself. It would be extraordinarily difficult to underpin an existing building like that and almost impossible to control issues with some settlement and cracking and that sort of thing. So what we ended up doing was coming up with a garage plan that mitigated that by pulling the building away from the Jane Perlman building for most of the perimeter. As you can see here, it's sort of stepping down to the left, coming away. And then the shaded sort of lighter tan colored area, that's the ramp that's coming down. So that ramp is coming down alongside that zone, but it's coming down from a higher elevation. So the garage itself is ramping down and around. The previous plan actually ramped down sooner, landed lower, and then ramped down the second level down, and that's how we were able to achieve more parking. But with this plan, we're limited to 25 spaces to achieve that distance that we need from the building next door. Now, the other thing I spoke about was the reduction in the dwelling units. What you're seeing here are 2 plans. The one on the upper portion is what was approved previously, and the lower plan shows the typical floor for what we're proposing now. Effectively, what we're doing here is reconfiguring the units to meet that demand that we had talked about earlier. And we're also, in turn, pulling the building a little bit away from the Jane Perlman building. You can see on the lower diagram, there's now a gap between our proposed building and the Jane Perlman, which is the gray to the north. And then we're effectively taking that leftover space, which used to occupy 12 units, and then we're pushing and pulling those demising walls around to divide it down into 11 units per floor instead of 12, and that's raising the overall average square footage for units. This won't really have many impacts to the exterior that's noticeable, except for making it a little bit pulled away from the building and slightly shorter. And this refinement is going to allow us to meet those market preferences I was referring to. And you can see this is the diagram that Bill had brought up earlier. On the left was the building that's as approved. On the right is the building as proposed. And it's really limited to some changes to the balconies due to just the units shifting around a little bit, and some other very slight tweaks and a very slight reduction in the height. Otherwise, we're trying to make this almost identical to what was approved before.
Great,
Now,
thanks, Greg. So now we're going to discuss comments that we've received from existing Perlman residents, and Rich Minacchio will go through these.
Thank you, Bill and Greg, for that explanation. So I think as everybody knows, so the parking lot we're building on is adjacent to the Jane Perlman building, which we own and operate. And the residents who live in this building, we're actually here right now, are stakeholders too. I'm happy to say that a few years ago, we did a full rehab of this building, so it's a beautiful building as well. And we're happy to provide that quality of life for the residents. We did get some written questions, and we are going to also have an in-person meeting at the building at 7 p.m. So if folks didn't get their questions in, they can certainly ask them at 7. But here are some of the questions that were submitted. Greg alluded to this about concerns that the new building will be too close to the existing building. So we're going to actually move it away from the existing building for the structural reasons that were mentioned. So even though we're having to reduce the number of underground parking spaces, we think it's a much better, it makes a lot more sense from a structural perspective and a safety perspective to do it this way. So we have structural engineers. It's going to be a carefully developed building, and there's going to be absolutely no impact at all on the Jane Perlman building. Second, the parking space issues. So we have, as Bill mentioned, we did a survey of the parking that's needed overall in Evanston, but we also know how many spaces are used currently by our own residents. So with the surface parking that's going to stay, our residents are going to have continue to have that option. And for any residents of 1900 Sherman that aren't accommodated with the outdoor spaces at Perlman, they'll be able to park right across the way at the Link building free of charge. So the parking, there won't be a resulting parking shortage for the existing Perlman residents. The third question is an interesting one. One of the reasons we think this is beneficial to the community is because we're going to really add the green space here. It's going to, in addition to the architectural design, which you saw, which is going to be beautiful, we're also going to add some outdoor spaces and increase the usable green space on that very important corner at Sherman and Emerson. We spent a lot of time on the landscaping plan. And we think everybody's going to like it, and we hope you like it and hope you use it. Fourth question, the question of the amenities in the building. Will not be fair if the residents of the new building use the patio. So, the public spaces at this new building, the Emerson, can be used by community members, but the amenities that are unique to both buildings will be used by the residents at each building. So the patio area that we currently built out at the Perlman building will continue to be used by residents of Perlman, and the amenities inside the building at the Emerson will be used by the residents of the Emerson. But there's in no way, shape, or form are we restricting the outdoor spaces, because that defeats the whole purpose. We wanted to make this building a connector to the community. So in that respect, it's going to be open and usable by all Evanstonians. Finally, the question of affordability. I have to say that we're very proud that we are actually going to put, and I know we've had back and forth on the 34 or the 51, but we have 51 affordable apartments. And I would say, with all the development that's gone on in Evanston, I'm not sure if you get to 51 when you add up 3, 4, or 5 buildings. So the fact that we're sticking to our commitment on this to provide 34 apartments for low-income residents and 17 for people in the middle, which we define at 80% of median income, I think is a testament to our commitment to the city and the all the residents, because we did not reduce the number of affordable units, and this is almost a third affordable now, which is I think a great thing, and it's we're very happy for that. I think that was
And Rich, if I could just add to that.
yeah.
Yeah. Mixed income development is the current state of the art in affordable housing. HUD's new developments, they don't want any 100% affordable housing. They want all mixed income housing. And the reason is that 100% affordable creates a concentration of poverty, really. And you know, the life outcomes for people who live in 100% affordable housing have been shown to be much less beneficial than the outcomes of low-mod households when they're in a mixed income environment. And so we think we wanted this to be a mixed income development, and I think we have a really great proportion of 1/3 affordable and 2/3 market rate. So I just want to comment on that. And Greg, let's go to the next slide. Just to really reiterate what Megan said, this is the schedule that she put forward. This is what we understand will be the process. The DAPRA meeting, she's scheduled it for the 29th of September. So that set. The Plan Commission, unless something goes amiss, will be October 13th. The public can make comments at that meeting. The City Council's Planning and Development Committee will then consider it on the 8th of November, and then the full council will meet and take action later that evening on the 8th, as we understand it. So now, next slide, Greg. We are open for public discussion, questions and answers, members of the public or anybody in attendance here on the Zoom call. And I don't know if Joanna, you want to moderate this, or if it needs moderation.
I think we can all see whose hands are raised. So Councilmember Kelly, if you wanted to facilitate, or if you want staff to, however you want to handle it.
You're muted.
Okay, sure. Thank you. I'll go ahead and call on residents. Tina?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, council member. So I had a couple of questions. So do you believe, I apologize if you've answered this question, I was distracted by a phone call, but do you believe that the ground is stable enough for this tall building, considering that, you know, the water front has come this far into the building, you know, the land here in Evanston. It's kind of like beachfront. The years ago, we've had problems, including a building, the garage fell down. And we have problems with lopsided buildings and so forth. Do you believe 16 stories is still appropriate for this area?
Greg?
Yeah, I can answer that for you, Tina. Yeah, it wouldn't be an issue for how we're designing this building. Unlike buildings from the Perlman era, we are designing this to be on caissons, so the caissons will extend quite a ways. I want to say it's on the order of 50 or 60 feet down, so that's well below the water table. We're also, in reducing the parking, not digging down as deep with the parking in the basement to begin with. So that would help with any water issues. But even if there are, and therefore we're actually, I believe, up above the water table at this point. But we're also going to be implementing a few other things to help with water management relative to keeping water out of the garage. But that really doesn't impact the structure at all. That's more to just make sure that everything stays dry. But the construction technique of using caissons really doesn't leave that with any concern. We did, though, just to assure it's not an issue, we did hire a geotechnical engineer. There's been soil borings to make sure we understand what we're building onto. And those recommendations have driven the structural design of the building.
And let me just add one thing, Greg, that the city will retain its own structural engineer as part of the building permit review process and confirm independently that structural design is adequate.
Okay, and I have a couple more questions. So the 17 units you say is at 80% AMI. So the 34 affordable units, what is the AMI for those units?
So the AMI for the 30%, excuse me, the 34 units, those units are going to be have project-based vouchers attached to them. So the regulation says that you have to be at 50% of median or below to qualify for one of those units. But
So what are you, okay, so like I'm a landlord and as you know, Mr. Monacchio, the HUD with Section 8 is 30% AMI. Are someone with Section 8 voucher, are they able to apply at your building?
yes, the question, so the rule says you have to be at 50%. You're right. HUD does then prioritize people that are even lower income. But
Correct.
to answer the question, anybody who is at 50% of median income or below will be eligible to apply for one of the project-based units. So because there's project-based subsidy attached to the unit, you wouldn't have, if somebody had a tenant-based voucher, you wouldn't have a double subsidy. But they could apply, and then they would just relinquish their tenant-based voucher and move into the Emerson.
Okay, so if they have a voucher, Section 8 voucher right now, they could apply.
They
So,
could.
all right, and so what if they're with like Connections for the Homeless or any other agencies? Do you work with those agencies as well, or just
Yeah,
the Housing Authority?
No, I would say we work as close with Connections for the Homeless as we do with any not-for-profit in the entire county. Every time we have waiting lists open for our buildings, the existing buildings, the Connections for the Homeless always sends us a number of tenants. We've housed, actually, I just heard this number. In 2020, we housed 95 residents who had been formerly homeless at our buildings. So we put a very high premium on that. And the Connections for the Homeless is a great organization, and they're very active, as I'm sure they're going to be in this case, whenever we have an open waiting list.
So currently, like when I have a Section 8 tenant, I have a chart that I go by, which is the payment standards chart. Do you have something similar for these units, or are you doing something different?
Oh, it'll be the same, right? The payment standard for the project-based voucher and the tenant-based voucher for Evanston, this zip code, it's the same.
Okay, so sometimes I have difficulties with when I'm trying to rent to a housing authority person for Section 8 and for the comparables of rent. So do you have a separate person that deals with these rentals on site, or do they have to deal with the same people that I do downtown on Jackson?
So your question was about comparables. So you would get the payment standard. The only reason you would submit for comps is if you wanted to go above the standard.
I'm gonna. I need to send you an email then.
All right, we'll talk. We can talk offline tonight.
Yeah.
But
I just wanted to know: is there on-site when someone comes to apply for a unit? Do they deal with someone on site, or do they deal with someone at a different location, like on Jackson?
We'll have on-site leasing here.
And the affordable units as well, as do they deal with the on-site person as well?
We're going to treat everybody the same.
Okay, and so just a couple of more questions here. So So what is the rent proposal for the units that are market rate?
I don't have the rents in front of me at the moment. We went through this in the plan development process, but I don't have those numbers in front of me. But, you know, we're gonna, for the market rate units, we're gonna try to attract the highest rents we can, because that's the source of income we're using to subsidize the 51.
Yeah, well, I hope that soon, because I've asked this question in the past and you didn't have an answer. So I know, Mr. Manacchio, that you have the answers to everything with the Housing Authority. So I want you to please, in the soon future, that we can see what the comparable rents for market rate here in Evanston. It's very expensive here in
Right.
Evanston. And so making the units affordable is really really important, and it's important to know how that Evanston is being priced out. So you being the Housing Authority specialist here, is very important that we're not being priced out even by the Housing Authority.
Couldn't agree with you, Ms. Rena. So
would
let me
hope
just,
that-
yes, I can answer that. But see, the way we're going to do that is by guaranteeing that 51 are rent restricted. You see?
Right, well, 80% AMI is really not, you know, it's not affordable. So
No,
you should
people
just
at
cross that off.
80% of median, though, they need that housing too, and their rents are going to be much lower
But
than the
that's
market.
really still not affordable. As you know, working for HUD many years, as you have, and I take the 30% AMI, and that's low income. And Evanston is already very expensive. So it's very important that we know how much the rents are that you're trying to charge at this building,
Right.
not only for the market rate as well as for the so-called affordable units. Last question, and then I will let
Let
someone.
me just answer that, Tina, because the missing middle rents will be affordable. I mean, they're going to be in the, you know, the $1,100, $1,200 range, you know, which is $1,300 range, which is very, very affordable for a brand new building in a beautiful neighborhood. So I agree with you on that. That's why we're doing all these affordable units.
Yeah. So last question, and I know other people have questions. So say that you when you come in front of Plan Commission or City Council or whatever, and let's say things don't work out for you, will you still continue to go with the previous plan development, or will you continue to try to make changes?
I mean, we can't do what's, the city has to approve it. So we can't do anything that the city doesn't approve.
Right, but I'm saying they've already approved your first plan development. So if something goes awry and you do not get your wishes for the changes, will you proceed with what you have already been approved with?
Well, you know, as you know, Tina, I've been working on this for years now, so I very much want to build, but I don't want to underestimate the importance of these changes. We think these changes are for the betterment of the building, structurally on the parking, and expanding the number of units so we can have a fully rented building with enough income so that we can actually pay the rents and subsidize the rents for the 51. So, you know, we need this. We would very much like and are requesting that the council approve our amendments, but you know how long we've worked on this. So, you know, we have a very strong desire to build and add this to the community.
And we have 4 separate amendments that we're requesting. It may be that the city council approves 3 of them and not 1. We just have to see how it goes. I think the Housing Authority has a commitment to build this project. And we will respond to whatever the council decides and go from there.
Okay, well, thank you for answering my questions. And Mr. Manacchio, I would definitely be in touch, because I do take Section 8 frequently, and I do frequently have problems with the caseworkers approving rent that's within the chart. So I will look forward to your help with that.
You contact me directly, yes.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Tina. And Jane Woolley?
I had to unmute. Hi. I have a clarification and a comment, a quick comment. The numbers, one of the slides showed 16 and one of them showed 17 for the missing units.
Yeah,
And
we're reducing the total number of units by 16, but our missing middle units have not changed.
okay, but one of the slides did show it. And when I add 118 plus 34, okay, plus 17, okay. So the number is 17.
Yes.
For sure. Okay, I think one of the slides showed it as 16, so you might want to fix that. Also, a third of 169 is over 156. So this is my comment. I think you shouldn't say a third of them are affordable.
So we're proposing 152 units, not 168. That's one of the.
Oh, 152.
So
it is.
Oh, yes.
152, so that is a third.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, other questions? In the chat, I see a question about the original number of parking spaces. So that's reduced, correct?
Correct.
Right, okay. And okay. Yeah, there's more questions about the market rate. Can you give us a ballpark idea, Rich, of there's
Sure.
some questions in the chat about what the market rate.
Yeah, no, we can give you a ballpark, Council member. Depending on the size of the unit, of course, but the market rate units will be anywhere from, the $1,700 range to the 20, upwards of 2,700. I mean, it's the market's going to decide this, but it's going to be a beautiful building, and we think we can, we think we'll be very competitive. But it'll be similar to what we see at at the Everdor and some of the other buildings around ours.
And let me just say that we have expectations on the market rate rents, obviously, in order to do our financial pro forma, but the market rate rents will vary, from year to year, as they do in every building. So what we start out with would just be a starting point, and it would flow with the market after initial lease up.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Cecile McHugh.
Hi, I'm sorry I was late to the meeting, so you may have gone over this, but so excuse me if you have, but the last building was intended to be initially said to be 100% senior. And at the very end of the meetings related to the original proposal, we found out that it would be 80%, I believe, senior and 20% non-senior. And we never did find out what those 20%, who you were targeting those apartments for the 20%. And now the plan has changed. So could you tell me what percent will be seniors and what percent and who will be the other remaining percentage?
I can start, and then we have our general counsel on, and Alicia's on too. So we're marketing toward this active adult, 55 plus, and we intend to lease all of the apartments to that demographic, at least in terms of the head of household. There are some HUD and fair housing laws that limit absolutely saying 100%. There's the Older Americans Act, and then there's some fair housing amendments. So I think that was the point that came up at one of the meetings. But we fully intend to lease these all the apartments to people that are 55 plus. That's going to be our marketing strategy. That's our demographic. That's who the building's going to be built for.
I thought that was age discrimination. If you did that, if you limited, is it just a matter of only if you restrict, but not if you target? Is that the point?
Well, so I think maybe if John Duncan can weigh in on this and describe what the law is with respect to age restricted buildings.
Yeah, there are laws about age discrimination, family discrimination, and when you combine them together, the property will be marketed so that there will be intended to have at least one person in the unit who is 55 and older. There may be, let's say, they may have a spouse who's under 55, or they might have another resident there that's under 55, but the rule would be to combine all these rules so that it would be at least one resident of 55 and older.
So then are you saying then, to answer specifically, it would only be age discrimination if you explicitly restricted it, and you are saying instead you are intending it to be? If that makes
No,
sense?
No, go ahead. Somebody was, Rich, was that you?
Well, I was just going to say that the law is the law. The federal law is the federal law. So, but, like I said, we fully intend to have these units leased to people, that, as John said, that are 55 and older, at least one person in the household to be 55 plus. But the fair housing rules in this realm are very complicated.
Okay.
So it will operate as
So
an
why did you say at the end of before the meetings, before this first initial version was approved, you said you just found out that you could not have it be 100% senior, is my recollection, and therefore it was going to be 80% senior? And so can we revisit that a little bit? And why was that big? Why did you feel you had to make that announcement, that there was a change in the residents, demographics that you'd be serving?
So I think we just wanted to be precise and to make people aware that there are fair housing laws that will come into play. We can't absolutely say that everyone who lives in the building will be 55 and over. Obviously, as Rich said, if you have a couple who's living there and one spouse is over 55 and one is not, that is allowed. There may be child of the lessee who's under 55.
Okay.
Can't say that every person living there will be 55 and over.
Okay, well, when I said 100% senior, I meant 100% senior households or 100% 55 households. I'm not hearing a very specific answer, so I guess we may as well go on, because what we're wondering about is, let's just put it this way, the people who are not seniors, who do you intend them to be? Obviously, we don't want them to be students. Obviously, we don't want it to be a bunch of Northwestern students, and we were told the link would not become a student dorm, and it is, and it's right next door. So how would you answer that?
Well, here's how I would answer that. The first meeting I had in City Hall was, the city was very explicit with me that this building not be for students. And the city asked me to build a building for folks that are 55 and over. And that's exactly what we're doing. Now, I think it is a little confusing, because as we did some more research, and John might have to just get back to the group or submit something in writing. We did come across some conflicting laws regarding this issue. But, I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but this building is for 55 plus, and it's not intended in any way, shape, or form for Northwestern students.
Okay,
Yeah, so
well, the
I
link, I'm sorry, but I guess we're just going in circles, because the link was never intended to be supposedly for Northwestern students, and yet there's probably nobody but Northwestern students there. So, and then the other question.
Well, Cecile, what we can say is that this will be age restricted to 55 and over to the maximum extent permitted by law.
Okay, and then to the remainder of the extent, who will you expect to be in there? A man from the Perlman building who I believe was perhaps disabled, I'm not sure, was inquiring perhaps for friends that was asking, could disabled people then be in this building? And couldn't disabled buildings people inhabit the rest of the units, or some of them?
Well, absolutely, and a certain number of units have to be designed to be handicap accessible. Greg, is that not correct?
That's true. Yeah.
Oh, good. How many will be handicapped accessible?
We haven't reevaluated that, but I believe it's set at 20% right now, but I would need to confirm that to be sure. I wouldn't count on that, but it would be the amount that's required by code to be type A that we would be
And that's an ADA requirement. So again, there are a number of laws that come into play in terms of who occupies and the number of handicap accessible units. So it's very difficult to precisely get down to absolute numbers on these things.
Do I need to give someone else a chance to ask a question because I had a second question I can wait for?
Okay, if you want to circle back, Cecile, that'd be great. I
Okay.
have Kira has a question.
Hello. Yes, my question is looking at, as you know, the Avador has gone up, and that is a luxury senior high-rise building. Subsequent to that, a senior building has been built on Green Bay Road and Ridge. It's called the Truly, I believe. And they were, because they were a little delayed in building and they built after the Avador, in light of the Avador and all of the abundance of senior luxury housing, they opted to come down in height and have fewer units because they were concerned, they just thought there was a saturation in the market, especially, we have so many other senior living places. So I'm just wondering why, why that isn't a concern for HAC, when there's not one, but two senior luxury buildings. And also there's probably another proposal coming back on Chicago Avenue for an extension of the Marion, but being luxury apartments. And also the city itself had a consultant recently submit a report. I think they hired them to assess something else like all of our assets, but it came out in the report. They found very high vacancy rates of these luxury rentals and really, a pretty saturated market. So I just, I guess the question is, isn't there some concern that there's a saturation in luxury housing and senior luxury housing? And then I guess a question for the city is there any, are we gauging these vacancy rates? I mean, it's really not healthy for our city to have high vacancy rates while our downtown just kind of flounders and, is a ghost town, basically. We're changing our whole downtown here and we're not getting good results. So anyway, that's a lot to answer, but maybe you can answer if you've looked into these.
Well, we have, and I just want to say one thing. I mean, it would be great if we could, kind of focus our questions to the issues at hand, which are the amendments that we're talking about. We did talk extensively about market demand when we had the original project approval. We produced a market study that showed that in fact would be high demand going forward. That's what we understand. That's what we believe. That's what our investment people are also banking on. So, we think there will be strong market demand. We have a third of our units as affordable, which are not market driven. Okay, so that's one difference between our building and the Avador. But I kind of would rather not revisit a lot of these topics.
If you don't mind, I mean, I did want to host this meeting to hear from community, and I think it's important that you hear their thoughts and concerns, even if it's somewhat outside of the scope of the modifications. I think it's important. I think Kira is making an important point. We are very concerned about vacancy rates. So, I think it's a question that I think is important.
Oh, we agree, Councilmember Kelly. And maybe, I don't want to put him on the spot, but he is our new partner. Kurt Bailey is, he does this every day. And I know that they would not have gotten involved in a project such as this if they weren't confident in the market. Kurt, do you want to just say a few things about that? If he's still with us?
Let's see.
Charlie, are you with us?
Yes, while we're waiting for
Charlie.
that, maybe if anyone can answer if there's been another market study since we've been in a pandemic, for the last 18 months, and it's expected to continue. So I just wonder if you're tracking that as well.
We are tracking that. I see Kurt's back on, but yes, the one part of the market that is come back gangbusters is this market. So that we do follow it very closely. But Kurt, did you hear the question?
I'm sorry, I didn't. I got a call from Commissioner Cox at the BPD, so I had to take that. I wouldn't jump on.
No, it's okay.
What was it, Rich? And
Okay,
hopefully answer.
I can repeat the question. It was, I was saying that there's two high-rise luxury senior buildings that I think also have the required affordable housing, or they had to. I mean, the equivalent, I'm not sure. But the second one that came along was a little delayed. So they actually decided to come down in height and reduce the scope of the project because of the first building, the Avador, because they were, you know, they were worried about saturation of the market. So I just, you know, I wondered why, you know, if HAC is concerned when there's not one, but two other new senior, you know, senior luxury buildings. And even we might likely have another one coming. That's an extension of the near the Marion. It has the name, but it would be luxury housing. So yeah. So and then the second question was, have you been tracking it since COVID? Since COVID's continuing, it's not, you know, it's not sort of coming to a close as we all expected.
Yeah. So to answer those questions, I'm not familiar with the reduction in the size of that building. We have been tracking the senior buildings delivered in Evanston and where they're having the most leasing success. And that is directly resulting in revising a little bit what the sizes of the market rate units are, which is why we're in front of you today. We want to have a successful building. At the end of the day, the success of the building, it being fiscally viable, will really be dependent upon how the performance of the market rate units would then subsidize the third of the building, which is affordable. And so we want to have those units be very desirable. And as you track the Avador, the larger units have leased faster and at higher rates. And so while we always have concerns about markets, certainly, and it doesn't, I will tell you, it doesn't help to have it age restricted, right? That you are saying, or we're limiting our band, obviously, of people that we can rent to. But we feel pretty confident that, you know, Evanston is a very strong, terrific market. And that if you look just at the demographics of this country and the baby boomers, you know, aging, there are a lot of folks over 55 who are going to be either moving out of single family homes and or looking for a place to move to that we think will love this location and the amenities in the building that we're able to provide. So we feel confident, although we're always kind of verifying, if you will, the market.
Okay, I mean, thank you for that answer. You know, we've heard so many developers sort of say that same thing, and then sure enough, it's like high vacancy rates. So it's yeah, I appreciate your answer, but I also wanted to share that.
No, I agree. It's a big concern. And then Bruce Enenbach.
Unmuted. My name is Bruce, not Hannah. She's the last one to use this thing. I have a question about real estate taxes. The 1900 Perlman building currently is a not taxable entity. Is that correct?
We pay payment in lieu of taxes there, so the taxes are reduced.
And why are they reduced?
We've had an agreement with Cook County since 1946 to pay a payment in lieu of taxes for our units. Otherwise, they wouldn't be affordable.
And with this new building, will it be taxed differently than the current 1900 building?
Yes.
Will it, since they are largely market rate, will it be taxed as if it was a market rate building?
We're going to have those discussions as we move along. We're going to have those discussions with the assessor, the Board of Review, but it most certainly will be taxed differently than 1900 Sherman, yes.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
The other questions? And let's see, Cecile, you have, oh, I'm sorry, Linda?
I have more.
Linda Crawford?
I have more.
Okay, so Linda, and then we'll come back to the folks who've already asked questions.
Tina, I have a question for you. People at the 30% of AMI, what kind of rents do they typically pay?
So those folks pay 30% of their income for rent. So, if you get Social Security, disability or insurance and it's $1,000 a month, that person would pay $300. And the
Okay.
subsidy and the voucher would cover the remainder.
Oh, okay, so it's sliding scale.
It is.
But then you make up the difference somehow.
The voucher does, yes.
And who pays for the voucher?
We as a housing authority receive, so we administer about 17,000 vouchers in Cook County.
Okay.
So we're in fact attaching 34 of those 17,000 to this property.
Okay, so the money comes from the county.
Federal
Okay.
government, federal government.
Federal government, okay. It's my taxes either way, so it doesn't matter. And I still want to make a comment about the parking. I know we've hit this over the head, but when the residents talk to me, they talk about it's not so much that a lot of them own cars, but a lot of them have guests who come and go and need parking space while they're there to come and go. And if you're going to have similar populations, if it's going to be like doubled, I just don't see where you have enough parking spaces, especially for people who are wheelchair bound or severely limited ambulatory. That place at the link underneath is going to be difficult for them to traverse.
Well, maybe our general counsel wants to weigh in, but again, people that have a disability or a reasonable accommodation, we're gonna accommodate those folks with those in those spots. You're right. The outdoor parking is reduced, but that doesn't mean that we're going to mandate that people who are wheelchair bound have to park across the way at the link.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have right now.
Okay.
And Jane, you had another question?
I lived at the Marion last year, and in fact, we were told that they are luxury apartments for 55 plus. That's what they're aiming at. So I just thought I'd add that. But my question is, before I moved here, I looked at the Avador, and it has a certain number of, you said that you would be charging on that scale, but it has a certain number of support systems. For example, they give you and at that time, at any rate, they gave you a breakfast every day. It was a continental breakfast, but it was a breakfast. And they also have activities and stuff like that. Are you planning to have that kind of thing in this building?
There's going to be a lot of amenities in this building, yes. Not the continental breakfast, though.
Amenities.
Services for services.
Activities.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's see, Cecile, I think you had another question.
Yes, my next question is related to the traffic and parking study. A lot of what I'm saying is from memory, it's been a while, but I'm quite certain that the traffic and parking study was done based upon the demographic of low income, 100% seniors in the building. And obviously that's changed. And so I am wondering, in addition, the parking study, I believe, was done in July when NU was not in session before the link was built. And I would ask, as a good neighbor, whether you would update the traffic and parking study, because we are having a lot of trouble going west on Emerson to the point where we just can't get to Green Bay Road in rush hour traffic. It's been a while since we've had rush hour traffic, but that will happen again. And it has forced us to go south to Church to go west or north to Lincoln to go west.
So our traffic and parking consultant is not with us on this call. I do know that their study was based on an age-restricted building, but not 100% affordable. It was always going to be a proportion of affordable. It was based on 168 units. Now we have 152 units, so there'll be less parking generation, less traffic generation. If the Housing Authority would want to update the traffic study, we could certainly, talk about that. It was the traffic counts are based on. They don't take their own counts. They rely on counts that have already been made with IDOT or the county or other entities on the major roads. So I don't think it was based on lower traffic counts when the university was not in session.
May I ask that someone there, including yourself or someone else, if you delegate, go back and read the traffic study, because I did, and again, it's been a while, but I saw that it was based upon the fact that there would be income, that it was based upon the traffic patterns of low-income seniors. And also I saw on the date that it was done in July. Obviously I knew was not in, only in summer session. And I could see that it was done before the link was built. So I just want to ask if someone could look at that and consider updating the traffic and parking study, because we have traffic and parking problems in this area. Thank you.
I will look at the traffic study and I will confirm with the firm who did that, their assumptions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That would be great. Yeah, I agree. Those are great points, Cecile. I think we do need a traffic study that reflects the revised from the very initial plan when it was going to be, I think, entirely affordable to this new plan and with students post-COVID. And so I think that is important data. Are there, let's see, other questions? I had to switch to my phone. Let's see, Tina, do you have another question?
Yeah, yes, I do. Thank you. So kind of to talk about the traffic, are you upgrading the traffic lights and the street lights in the area of your building? Because they're at Elgin Road and Emerson, that kind of triangle place, those have old outdated lights and the traffic will be impacted greatly with your building, and also at Sherman and Emerson. And the street lighting there, do you, I know the city, I'm not really sure about the city's policies. I think that the developer should contribute more to signage, street lights and traffic lights. Are you planning on doing any of that?
Well, with respect to traffic and the street lights and signalization, I'm pretty sure that the traffic study did not indicate that there would be a need for upgrading signalization. I don't know if Joanna or anybody from the city can weigh in. I would presume that the city's engineering department reviewed the traffic study. And as for our own right-of-ways, we will be doing streetscape and improvements of our sidewalks. I would imagine that if the lighting is not good, that we will upgrade that, Rich.
Yes.
Okay, and last
And
question.
to speak to, I'm sorry to interrupt, to speak to that, if Public Works was going to require some kind of payment for those upgrades, it probably would have happened with the initial approval of the development. I would need to talk with Public Works to see what any future plans are for any updating of any traffic signals or lighting in that area, because if it's something that's already being planned, then we wouldn't necessarily have the development come in and contribute to that.
Well,
That,
I
that
know,
does sometimes on it. That does sometimes.
well, I know that supposedly at least 5 or more years ago that the city was supposed to get grant money for that area, and that never happened. And those lights are very old and outdated and need turn signals because some person just a short time ago got hit by a bike right there at Emerson and Emerson and Sherman. And so and with more people down there, it's very crowded. And just like a previous speaker stated, at rush hour is very terrible. And those lights need to be, the traffic lights need to be updated, and the street lights. So the city, just a side comment for the city officials, need to stress more on the developers to, since they're having these buildings, they need to contribute to making the change. I know many other cities, when the new buildings come about, they're required to have the new lighting and traffic lights, considering they have a heavy impact on the area. So my last question is, what do you believe the build out time for this building will be?
Turn it over to Greg here.
Yeah, I'll take that. We're still working out when it would actually start. Once we get through this process, there's still the need to finish the drawings and get through the permitting. But that might be, and I'm just guessing right now because we actually haven't mapped out the timeline completely, but that might be a few month process. And then from there, we might be looking at somewhere in the range of 12 to 14 months for construction, but I would need to double check the schedule for that. But that would probably be a pretty good expectation for the range.
Okay, thank you very much. Black Lives Matter.
Thank you, Tina. Kira has another question.
Yes, this is going back to the traffic and parking. And I agree with Cecile and Tina here about the traffic there. And I also remember that I believe it was based on the existing 1900 Sherman, the demographics and such. And it is true that now it's really very difficult to drive west on Emerson. I mean, it's really at a standstill. But my question, I guess, is for the city. I believe the city proposed that, or staff suggested that the city begins hiring, the company that does the traffic study for these developments. So since this project is kind of coming back to the council, is that a possibility? Because it seems like the study that was done was just out of sync at this point with, not including an entire high rise that is now there. Northwestern was, I agree, it was July, and it seems to be the demographic that's in 1900, which will not be, as we know, the demographic in this building. So, I mean, is it possible that the city, based on the new recommendations, and I don't know if that was vote approved or not, that, maybe the city hires or does a new traffic study instead of the developers?
Well, let me make a suggestion that the HAC staff and city staff go over the existing traffic study and determine if it is out of date, if it has flawed assumptions. I don't believe that it's based on 100% affordable occupancy. I really don't. But I'd be happy to sit down with staff and go over it, and then if it's out of date or if it has flawed assumptions, then yeah, we should update that traffic study.
Great.
And Councilmember Kelly, there is a resident who has had their hand up for a while, it looks like, Hannah Innenbach. So I want to make sure they get a chance.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question. What is the purpose of the meeting at 7 o'clock at the Perman building?
So I can answer that, Bruce. That is because it's on site at the Perlman. Many of the residents don't access the internet or Zoom calls so easily. So I asked that we have one in place in person for easy access.
So there's no sense in attending both.
Correct.
Great. Thanks very much. Thanks for all.
You bet. Let's see. Other questions? I have a couple if nobody else. Cecile?
Go ahead, Claire.
Oh, so, I'm going to speak, I just want to speak to quality of living, and I do have concerns primarily for the Perlman residents. They're the ones that will be the most impacted by the building. And you mentioned even with the modifications now, you said there would be more green space. So just from the, it didn't look like, it looked like it was going to actually be the building would be going out, the FAR is increased, that it's going to be expanded southward a little bit. I mean, there are some trees there. And so I'm looking to have as much green space around there as possible. Again, the Perlman residents right now, they have a nice open space there. They're going to lose that. So I'm really looking to not have that even more reduced. So can you, Rich, you mentioned that this would, you mentioned the green space. I was a little confused with it. I mean, obviously they're losing a bunch of open space, but it also looks like even with the modification that there will be less green space.
You're muted.
Oh my God, that whole time I was muted.
Greg is muted. There you go.
Okay, I'm sorry if I was, no, what I was answering was, the fact is that we're building on a surface parking lot and we're going to create green space. That was a big priority of ours. I wasn't trying to suggest that the green space was going to be increased in the amendment process. But we always put a premium on green space. Greg, you want to?
Yeah, and what we could do too, I believe with the previous approval, I'll need to dig this back up, but I believe we did a comparison between the existing green space and what's proposed. I don't remember exactly where that ended up, but I think it's at least equivalent to what's there now. It's just being moved around a little bit effectively.
I mean, it looks like it's going to be decreased a little bit with the amendment.
The green space should be, yeah, we could generate a document to show that.
And there's theoretically green space with a parking lot, a planting strip on the south side of the parking lot. So we would be kind of reconfiguring the green space. We think the green space that we'll have within the building is much more usable than that planting strip in front of the parking lot. There'll be places for people to sit, flowers and trees and things that people can be right up next to rather than really landscaping for the parking lot. So we'll be doing, landscaping for people more so than for cars.
And there's one big old growth tree, I think, on this. Are you planning to take down trees for this? I know there's
We've
one
looked at that tree. We have looked at that tree extensively and actually talked to arborists, experts on preserving such trees. I think where we're at now is be very difficult to save that. Greg, can you comment on that?
Yeah, there was somebody from I believe the Morton Arboretum who wrote a report about it. We're still looking to see if it's viable, but from what we've been told, in order to save the tree, if I remember correctly, this was a little over a year ago now, it would require some pretty extensive work on the tree. Something like the top 10 or 15 feet would need to be cut off. It would need to be extensively trimmed, and then even with all of that effort, it was likely that it would die within a matter of a few years. So we're still double checking some things, but we're not sure that it's actually in a state.
So it would die given the context of the construction.
No, not even due to that is our understanding.
So where is this on a report from the Morton Arboretum?
Yeah, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that's where that was retained.
We actually contacted a number of arborists, someone from the Chicago Botanical Garden. I believe I did contact somebody from Morton Arboretum, as well as I talked to the city's arborist about this. And people have different opinions, and there's no guarantee you could carry out the best practices for tree preservation and the tree could still die. You could do it and it could live. Can't guarantee the tree would survive, and we haven't made a specific proposal about preservation of that tree.
Okay, so if there is any documentation on that, that'd be great. Again, I'm going to look to get to protect the most amenities I can for the residents currently living there, also for the neighborhood, but I'm particularly concerned about the impact on the Pearlman residents. So I am going to fight for that tree and as much green space as we can keep there. So you also mentioned the interior amenities will be off limits to the Pearlman residents. And the exterior amenities, over at the Pearlman would reside just with the Pearlman residents. However, but isn't there going to be like an outdoor terrace up on top?
There will be.
And so is that, can the Pearlman residents enjoy that rooftop terrace?
Rich, that's your question.
No, the roof, the amenities in the building will be for the people that live in the Emerson.
I know, I'm just saying the outdoor rooftop portion.
It's still
Yeah,
an Emerson amenity.
Yeah, that's an Emerson amenity, Councilmember. But we'll work with you directly on the green space and anything else on the exterior that we can provide, because I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and Cecile?
Hi, thanks. Earlier I spoke asking that a traffic and parking study please be done. I later realized you're asking to reduce the number of parking places. So we absolutely do need a new traffic and parking study. And also concerned about the effect of the construction on traffic, because as several people have said, it's really bad around here, trying to go west on Emerson. But what I wanted to comment on specifically now was the fact that the Pearlman building, I've heard from a source reputable, that it's filled with people who were not originally from Evanston. Now they're absolutely from Evanston and our neighbors. But I think that Evanston feels you'll be providing affordable units to Evanston residents who need housing. But you've said that while you can't restrict the residents to people who live in Evanston, and you can't use the Evanston waiting list, you would target your marketing to the surrounding community. Given that you have to inform everyone on your own waiting list of the availability of these affordable units, and given the internet, I don't understand how you can target your marketing to a certain community. Could you explain?
Yes, I talked about this at length, and I'll try to.
Oh, in this meeting? If so, I'm so sorry.
No,
I'll listen to it.
I'd be happy to repeat myself. So.
You're not coming through clearly, Rich. I'm not sure what's happening.
You're sort of muffled, Rich.
I think your connection is bad. Your internet connection is bad.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Now you're good.
Yeah.
Okay, the 17 apartments for the moderately priced apartments, we are going to the first stop is going to be the Evanston Affordable Requirements Ordinance list. The 34 lower income units for it's a very dicey fair housing question, but they won't be guaranteed for Evanston residents. But I've explained in many times, and I'm happy to do so again. You mentioned the waiting list. We do site-based waiting lists because for the very reason that you, I think, were alluding to. When we put project-based vouchers, in other words, attach vouchers to the buildings, we do that in private developments all over the county. The waiting list, the list is at the site. So this will be the center of activity. Now, you're right about the internet and people knowing about it, but we have found in every single one of our developments that have been built in the north and northwest suburbs, about 3/4 of the residents are from the town, or maybe from one town over. So I've said this from day one. I want to build, we were fortunate enough to have Evanston welcome us to your community, and I want to build this building for Evanstonians. So I can make the commitment on the 17, but on the 34, we have a good record on leasing to folks from the community, but we will not restrict it. But I can say, based upon our track record, that most of those households will come from Evanston. Now, on the market rate, it'll be from all over most likely, but hopefully mostly from Evanston.
Okay, but for those site-based waiting lists, you need to inform everybody on your own waiting list of the fact that this waiting list is opening for this site, correct?
Yes, yes, but the reason we do it differently now is because we did several years ago, we did that. Every time we opened a new building, we sent a notice out to the entire list, and invariably nothing came back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to get these buildings filled as quickly as possible. So the site-based waiting list helps us get the building built quicker, and it helps us get more folks from the community. It isn't an absolute guarantee though, but it's like I said, the record, I know is clear, but we went to site-based waiting lists because what you described didn't work. It didn't bring the number of qualified applicants that we needed to fill the buildings. Generally, people seem to prefer to stay in their own regions. Not that they have to, but that's our experience in 11 years.
Okay, but you're advertising that these site-based waiting lists are open up on the internet, if not, or maybe you are sending an email to everybody on the tens of thousands of people on your waiting list. But in addition, I don't think your track record is good. I mean, am I wrong? Most of the residents of the Perlman building originally came from Evanston?
That was before my time.
Okay, well, could someone look into that? It just doesn't seem to follow from what you're saying.
I'm talking about in my experience, when private developers have built buildings for seniors, special needs, and for families, the majority of the residents come from the town.
Okay.
So I can't speak for how this building was occupied, but it wasn't a requirement. But site-based waiting lists make a difference, and all I can say is that we want as many Evanstonians living here as possible.
I think you said when you can only speak from what happens when private developers build a building, but you're not a private developer, so I don't know that I'm going to get a clear answer on this.
Actually, no. We provide the project-based vouchers. So we're the voucher. We give the vouchers regardless of who the developer is. We have not-for-profits, for-profits. We're in this case a developer. So I expect the same result.
Okay, but all right. Well, anyway, I still am unclear on this, but I don't think we're going to get anywhere. So thank you for your answers to my question.
Let's see. So I, again, my biggest concern here is for the residents of the Perlman. The Perlman is a lovely location for affordable housing. And just like here at the Voucher is also a wonderful location. So, and I love to preserve and keep those places as beautiful as possible, particularly because these are low income housing. So I'm concerned, right, that they're going to be suffering a tremendous negative impact in the quality of living as this building goes up in the open space in the parking lot next to them. Is there what kind of measures can be taken? We all know that if these were luxury apartments and wealthy people, there would be something done to some sort of compensation, something. So what can the Perlman, what's for these residents when this construction goes up, when there's pounding and noise, they're losing their parking, what can they get to help offset the harm?
I mean, I'm not sure there's going to be dire impacts on the Perlman residents. I mean, I don't think that's our team's feeling that there will be all these dire impacts on the Perlman residents.
No, I mean, they're losing their open space, and there's going to be construction just feet away from them for over a year. So come on.
There will be construction. There'll be
There's nothing
construction.
lovely about that.
I mean, right across the alley from the Link Building, there'll be construction. Right across the street from Sherman Gardens, there'll be construction. Yeah, there'll be
Yes, but the
construction.
closest ones are the Perlman. It's just like,
Okay.
it's literally how many inches away from the building. I mean, they're losing their parking space too. And we all know it's really nice. In the Wall Church, it's nice too, that they can pull up outdoors and park across the street. So they're losing this. And we all want affordable units in Evanston. So, but you know, this is going to impact these residents here, these low-income residents. And I feel their quality of living is just as important as somebody else who has a lot of money. So I'm just wondering, what can we do? I hope you're all taking this into consideration, right? That this is going to be an impact and not, I think frequently the residents of the Perlman feel like, oh, you're just lucky. Where else are you going to find a place where you only pay a third of your income or whatever? And I feel like there should be really a outreach to the residents there to say, you know, we understand this is, you know, is something to try to at least acknowledge this.
Yeah.
And we're meeting there tonight. We are meeting there tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Let me jump in here, Bill. Councilmember, yes. So, you know, you're talking to somebody who has, you know, spent his career working on behalf of low-income people. So believe me, I understand you. The first thing I did when I got here was rehabilitate the building that we're sitting in now, because I wanted to improve the quality of life for the residents. The air was stale. The buildings were not kept properly. Now it's a beautiful building. So yes, low-income people are by far my top priority. And we're going to mitigate, and we can sit down with you and our construction, McHugh, to talk about how we're going to mitigate the impact. But, you know, the fact is there was some, you know, there's disruption when there's construction. There was disruption inside this building when there was. But I can assure you that this has nothing to do with the socioeconomic status of the folks who live in the Perlman. We're going to do everything we can to reduce the impact. And as I mentioned, I mean, the first action we took in terms of construction was rehabilitating Perlman and Walchurch so they would be viable for another 40 years. So that is where our priority is. We're doing this market rate / luxury so we can subsidize these 51 apartments.
Okay, well, I don't want to enter into that debate right now because you are HAC and you're the most eligible for LIHTC credits. You'd be at the front of the line. So I don't want to, I mean, you could still have, you know, affordable units without having to build a 16-story.
But we have other
But I don't want to go down that one tonight, debating. But I do believe that this is the route that you all chose to, you know, enter into with a private partnership. You chose to do it this way. It's a new way. You could also have gone with, you know, federal with tax credits and done it differently. But right, so
yes. Well, one thing I'd like to point out, Rich, you said that all the Perlman residents of Perlman building who need a parking space will be provided a parking space free of charge. Is that correct?
Yes.
So there will be no impact on parking, even though the parking lots being redeveloped, a new building will be constructed in its place. Every resident of the Perlman building who wants a parking space will be provided a parking space.
great. And you say it'll be just over the alley at the Link?
Well, at the Link building is what we're thinking. Just over the alley, just to the west.
Okay.
And it'll be indoors.
And if I can interrupt, as part of the approval of the original ordinance that approved this development, there was a requirement to have lease, I think it was 50 spaces within 1,000 feet of their project site.
Right.
So they need to have that 50 feet regardless. With the reduction in space, if the Plan Commission suggested, if that is, I'm suggesting that is provided, we can require an additional number of parking spaces be leased within that distance.
Let me just point out that the Housing Authority's pledge is different than the 50 spaces. So the Perlman residents will be provided a space free of charge. The 50 spaces are not necessarily free of charge for the new residents of the Emerson building. The commitment to the Perlman residents is that they'll be provided free of charge to the residents.
Right, and right within proximity across the alley. Now,
Right.
I'm not sure, Megan, what would 1,000 feet be? Just so I know. So would that be like a block or two? Or could someone?
Well, the city block is about 650
it'll be a couple of
feet.
blocks.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a distance if you're elderly and. Okay, so the Perlman residents will have parking right there. The ones that would be leased that Megan mentioned at, whatever number, 50 at 1,000 feet, those would be for the residents at the Emerson.
Yes. Like I said, the residents of the Emerson will be directed to those 50 spaces. And if frankly there's a demand for additional spaces, the housing authority and the operators of the new Emerson will certainly find it for them. It would, they're not going to let units go unoccupied because of parking.
Okay. Let's see, other questions from the community here? Okay, so Barry? Barry? Okay, Barry, I see several hands up. Barry, are you there? Barry? No. Okay. Keen?
Hi, it's Kira. So I just, as far as just going back to Claire's question about residents, I remember some of the residents saying that they, sometimes even though they're not officially disabled, have difficulty walking, especially difficulty walking outside in winter. So, even within 1,000 feet or, a nearby building was going to be difficult for them. And they also mentioned their caregivers. A number of residents, being seniors, have caregivers coming and going, and they were concerned about that, about their caregivers in winter and at night and such. And then finally, if there's less parking, won't that put additional pressure on the neighborhood? And, won't neighbors, other residents have difficulty finding, parking themselves now? I know that area is really tight for parking as it is. And then I wanted to also clarify, I think I wasn't following when you said the residents could use all the amenities. Like, I don't know the difference between like 1900 Emerson. I was thinking that was Perlman. So I understood from previous meetings that the Perlman residents were not going to be able to use all of the amenities, but were you saying that yes, they can?
No, Tara, they said they couldn't, they wouldn't. And the one's called the Emerson, and then I think Perlman, but my understanding, Kira, is that they will each be essentially restricted to their own.
Inside the building, yes, the amenities for the residents will be those inside the building. The outdoor amenities at the Emerson will be available to Perlman residents, the plaza spaces, the sitting areas, and the green spaces.
So I think the Perlman residents are concerned that because of that, that's great to have access, but that would mean that they're only, that their patio then would not be, in fact, would end up de facto not being off limits.
No, the patio at the Perlman will stay for use only by the residents of Perlman.
Right. I think though they're concerned, like they don't want to be enforcers. That's not a way to live. Like, who's going to make that happen? It's like, how would that, you know what I mean? So I think that's a concern. It's great that I'm glad that the Perlman will have access to the outdoor. I hope there's some beautiful outdoor spaces at the Emerson, and I'm glad the Perlman residents will have access to that, but I think they're also concerned, like they have their patio and what will preclude them, and they don't want to be, who wants to live lives. They're your neighbors. You don't want to kick your neighbor off your patio.
No, the property manager would be responsible for making sure that no one comes on that patio except for the resident, the Perlman resident.
Right, when she's there, but like on weekends. I'm just saying, I think that's one of the concerns they expressed, which is a completely legitimate concern because she isn't there, Lily, on like weekends and much of the time. So again, I mean, I would definitely want to kick
I mean, that's something that we have to wait to see, and then we'll deal with it as we see it, but I doubt it that, you know, that they would go over there, but you never know what people do. So we will deal with it, just like we deal with people that park in the Walcheck parking lot that doesn't belong as a resident of the Walcheck parking lot, or even the Perlman parking lot. If we see them, we try to tell them, no, you cannot be over here. So it's just being neighborly, but communicating to them that you can't go over here. It's a private area.
Right, so I think that was just hopefully some helpful information for you all, that they're already kind of foreseeing that. That could be just to make sure the pieces are in place to avoid any sort of negative. That was just, you know, some input.
Yeah, let me just say on that, council member, these patios in the green space we built at our buildings, I mean, yes, we were very pleased because it's a great amenity for the residents that didn't previously exist here and elsewhere. So, no, our commitment is that those areas are absolutely for the use of our residents.
Great. Let's see, just give it another
No,
check.
no. Is there an answer to the, how do we safeguard, you know, the existing neighborhood residents as far as finding parking, since there's going to be less parking associated with this building?
So,
Like,
so there's going to be,
I assume
yeah.
residents and guests will be parking on the street, and it's already really hard to find parking spot there.
Right. Well, so remember, we still have the surface parking spots outside of the Perlman, and there are more than enough spots at the link to handle our residents. So we don't think that we are reducing the underground parking by 12, yes, but we don't think we're burdening the community because we will lease a commensurate amount from the link.
Do you know how many spaces at the link?
Alicia's working on that. Alicia, do you want to comment on that, or is it premature? What's the latest number?
We have not had an agreement signed with them. We do have one with the E2 building, but we're waiting on confirmation with the link.
But you've gotten assurances from them that they have a more than an adequate number of spots, correct?
Yes, they do, but they have not gave us a contract that says that it will be with us.
But we have the letter from E2, and so the link parking spaces would be in addition to that.
Well, that's my concern. I really am going to insist that there's parking spaces nearby for the residents of the Perlman. I don't want to think that they now have to truck over to the link, to the E2 to park. I mean, now that's really taken, that's like a triple whammy.
No, we'll get enough more than enough at the link, I think, council member, to accommodate the Perlman residents. And the question of caregivers came up, and we're looking at that. We don't want to cause undue burden on caregivers. So if in fact the agencies that the caregivers work for, in normal circumstances, if they have to pay to park, then we would expect the agency to pay it. But if there isn't that payment or subsidy available, we'll pay for it for caregivers.
Great. And let's see. Jane, did you have your hand up? No, it looks like she
I took it down, but when I moved into the Sherman Gardens, I first signed a contract for an apartment that was on the second floor on Emerson. And luckily for me, I found out within the 5 days that I could break the contract that the 16-story building was going up and that they were taking down that tree, which I really wanted. And so since I'm not low income, I just bought a different apartment. And I just thought I'd mention that because that seems pertinent.
Yeah, I will say the Sherman Garden residents did walk me over and said, that tree, make sure they don't take down that tree. So it's not just, anyway, there's a whole neighborhood. I'm speaking mostly on behalf of the Pearlman residents, but obviously the residents on this call who live across the street and nearby who are also, obviously we care about our green space and open space for the flow. I mean, open space is so important to us. So to everybody, to all humans.
If I can
Also,
interject,
I thought that I was too old, and surely the Perlman people are too, to have construction for 1.5 years of my life right outside of my window.
Right.
if I can interject, I think piggybacking off of what Ms. Hushaw mentioned, the link just last year requested and was approved to provide half of their parking, which is 170 spaces, to be leased to the public, whatever that looks like. So that'd be 85 spaces that they have available to lease to non-residents of that development.
And Megan, where are these spaces?
I'm not sure what their what discussions with HAC are, or what the final number will be for what is leased, if those conversations are still going on. But the link was approved to be able to lease 85 spaces to the public, or have some other kind of agreement for parking that are non-residents.
Oh, thank you. And is that, are they required to have 85 or they're allowed to?
I'm sorry?
Was part of the ordinance, are they required to keep 80? Are they required to have 85 available to lease, or they're allowed to have 85?
They are allowed to have 85 parking spaces available to lease to the public. So they have to have at least 85 parking spaces for their residents, and residents of that building. And the residents of that building are not able to get on street parking permits.
I see. Okay.
That's typically a condition of planned developments, is that those residents are not able to get on-site parking permits if there is permit parking in that area.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay.
And also to be cognizant of time and travel times for those members of HAC. I know we might want to draw the meeting to a close so they're able to get to the 7 o'clock on time. I know traffic is probably a bit crazy right now.
I would agree. Are there any other questions before we sign off here?
Super quick, it follows up from what Megan Jones said, if that's okay.
Okay.
Just want to confirm, and you were referring to this, Megan, the Emerson residents will not be able to get street parking permits. Is that the case?
I need to confirm on the ordinance, but I believe that was one of the conditions for
Okay,
this,
yeah,
one,
if we
with
could-
the 50 parking spaces within 1,000 feet.
Okay, if we could confirm that, that would be great. And also just pointing out, at least some people in Sherman Gardens lease parking places from the link too. So we don't want to have those places overbooked, overpromised, double promised. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all so much. So yes, that would be great if we could get some confirmation on what's available actually at the link. And the traffic study, I think that was something that we all agreed might need to be revisited. Thank you all so much. And I'll see most of the team in about an hour over at the Pearlman. Thank you also to the residents for coming up and all your great questions.
Thank you, Alderman Kelly.
Thank you.
And thank you, staff, Megan and Johanna, and who did I leave out? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Claire.
Sure. Thank you. See you in an hour.